The bustling terminal of JFK International Airport was a hive of activity, teeming with travelers rushing to catch their flights. Among them, Lisa, a flight attendant for a major airline, navigated the crowded space with practiced efficiency. Her eyes darted constantly between her watch and the sea of faces surrounding her, a sense of urgency evident in every movement. Lisa's uniform was impeccably pressed, her hair neatly tied back, but the sheen of sweat on her forehead betrayed her nervous state. She clutched a tablet in one hand, furiously tapping the screen to verify last-minute details for the upcoming flight to Los Angeles. The responsibility of ensuring a smooth journey for hundreds of passengers weighed heavily on her shoulders. As she approached the gate, Lisa overheard snippets of conversation from her colleagues. They discussed the full flight, the potential for delays, and the always-present possibility of difficult passengers. These concerns only added to Lisa's growing anxiety. She took a deep breath, reminding herself that she was a professional with years of experience. Still, the nagging feeling that something might go wrong persisted. The boarding process began, and Lisa assumed her position, greeting passengers with a practiced smile. Her eyes scanned boarding passes and carry-on luggage, ensuring compliance with airline regulations. Despite her outward composure, her mind raced through a mental checklist of tasks yet to be completed before takeoff. Once airborne, the real challenge began. The seatbelt sign had barely turned off when a group of passengers in the economy section started causing a commotion. Lisa made her way down the narrow aisle, her trained eyes quickly assessing the situation. A cluster of young adults, clearly friends traveling together, were speaking loudly and moving between seats, disturbing those around them. "Excuse me," Lisa addressed the group, her voice firm but polite. "I need to ask you to return to your assigned seats and lower your voices. We have other passengers trying to rest." The group turned to her, some looking sheepish, others defiant. One young man spoke up, his tone bordering on confrontational. "We paid for these seats. We should be able to enjoy our flight." Lisa maintained her composure, years of dealing with difficult passengers coming into play. "I understand you want to enjoy your flight, sir. However, it's my responsibility to ensure the comfort and safety of all our passengers. Please cooperate, or I'll have to involve the captain." The mention of the captain seemed to have the desired effect. Grumbling, the group began to disperse to their assigned seats. Lisa stayed for a moment, ensuring compliance, before moving on to her next task. As she made her way to the front of the plane, Lisa noticed a commotion in the first-class section. A woman was attempting to settle into a first-class seat, but something seemed off. Lisa approached, her training kicking in as she prepared to handle another potential issue. "Excuse me, ma'am," Lisa began, her tone professional. "May I see your boarding pass?" The woman looked up, surprise evident on her face. She was well-dressed, with an air of confidence that suggested she was accustomed to first-class travel. However, as Lisa examined the proffered boarding pass, she realized there was a discrepancy. "I'm sorry, but this boarding pass is for an economy seat," Lisa explained, keeping her voice low to avoid drawing attention. "I'll have to ask you to move to your assigned seat." The woman's expression changed from surprise to indignation. "There must be some mistake. I always fly first class." Lisa stood her ground, aware of the growing tension. "I understand the confusion, ma'am, but I have to follow airline policy. If you believe there's been an error, we can discuss it with the ground staff upon landing." The woman opened her mouth to protest further, but Lisa had already turned to escort her to the correct seat. As they moved through the cabin, Lisa could feel the eyes of other passengers on them, the air thick with discomfort. Little did Lisa know, this interaction would set in motion a series of events that would change the course of the flight and impact the lives of everyone on board. For now, she focused on resolving the immediate situation, unaware of the significance this seemingly routine exchange would soon hold. As Lisa guided the woman back to the economy section, she felt a tap on her shoulder. Turning, she saw Tom, her fellow flight attendant, with a concerned look on his face. "Lisa, do you know who that was?" Tom whispered urgently, his eyes darting towards the woman now reluctantly taking her seat in economy. Lisa shook her head, a sense of unease growing in her stomach. "No, should I?" Tom's eyes widened. "That's Maya Lawson, the actress and activist. She's huge in Hollywood right now, especially for her work on social justice issues." The color drained from Lisa's face as the implications of her actions began to sink in. She had just denied first-class seating to one of the most influential voices in entertainment and social activism. Her mind raced, trying to recall any recent news about Maya Lawson that might explain the seating mix-up. "She's been in the news lately for calling out discriminatory practices in the film industry," Tom continued, his voice low. "She's got millions of followers on social media, and she's not afraid to use her platform to highlight injustices." Lisa felt her palms grow sweaty. What she had thought was a routine enforcement of airline policy now seemed like a potential PR disaster. She glanced back at Maya, who was now typing furiously on her phone, a determined expression on her face. "I had no idea," Lisa murmured, her professional demeanor momentarily cracking. "I was just following procedure." Her boarding pass clearly showed an economy seat. Tom nodded sympathetically. "I know you were doing your job, but this could get complicated fast. Maybe we should inform the captain." As they discussed their next move, neither noticed the growing murmurs among the nearby passengers. Word was spreading quickly about the celebrity in their midst and the perceived slight against her. Meanwhile, Maya sat rigidly in her economy seat, her fingers flying over her phone's keyboard. She had initially been shocked by the denial of her usual first-class accommodation, but that shock had quickly turned to anger and then resolve. This wasn't the first time she had faced what she perceived as discrimination, but it was the first time in a while that it had been so blatant. "I will not be silenced," Maya muttered to herself as she crafted a social media post. She was well aware of the power her words carried and the impact they could have. This wasn't just about a seat on a plane. It was about the broader issue of how people of color were treated in everyday situations. Her post began to take shape. "Currently experiencing yet another example of the systemic discrimination that plagues our society. Denied my rightful seat on a flight. Watching as others are treated with respect and dignity that apparently doesn't extend to everyone. This is why our fight for equality is far from over." Discrimination. Enough is enough. Maya paused before hitting post, considering the potential fallout. She was no stranger to controversy, but she also knew the importance of using her platform responsibly. After a moment's hesitation, she pressed send, watching as likes and comments began to pour in almost immediately. The atmosphere in the cabin shifted palpably as passengers began to pick up on the tension. Some were surreptitiously trying to snap photos of Maya, while others were engrossed in their phones, likely reading her recent post. Whispered conversations broke out, with passengers debating the situation and taking sides. Lisa, still near the front of the plane, felt the change in the air. She knew she had to act quickly to prevent the situation from escalating further. But as she looked at Maya, now surrounded by a growing crowd of supportive passengers, she realized that this had already grown beyond a simple seating dispute. The flight, which had started like any other, was now charged with an energy that threatened to boil over at any moment. Lisa took a deep breath, steeling herself for what was sure to be a challenging journey ahead. She knew that her next actions would be crucial, not just for maintaining order on the flight, but potentially for her career and the airline's reputation. As the murmurs grew louder and the tension continued to build, Lisa realized that this flight was about to become much more than a simple trip from New York to Los Angeles. It was becoming a microcosm of the larger social issues that Maya fought against every day. And now, for better or worse, Lisa found herself at the center of it all. Amidst the growing tension on the flight, Sarah, a young film student, sat quietly in her window seat. Her attention captured by the unfolding drama. She had recognized Maya Lawson immediately and had been surreptitiously observing the entire incident. Now, as the whispers and murmurs spread through the cabin, Sarah felt a spark of inspiration. Pulling out her notebook, Sarah began to jot down her observations. Her pen moved rapidly across the page as she captured the details of the scene, the body language of the flight attendants, the reactions of nearby passengers, and the determined set of Maya's jaw as she typed on her phone. Sarah's mind raced with possibilities. This wasn't just a case of a celebrity being denied a seat upgrade. It was a microcosm of larger societal issues. Discrimination in everyday life, Sarah muttered to herself as she wrote. The subtle ways prejudice manifests, even when people think they're just following the rules. Her notes began to take shape, forming the outline of a potential screenplay. She envisioned a story that would explore the ripple effects of a single act of discrimination, how it could impact not just the individuals involved, but an entire community. Meanwhile, Maya's social media post was gaining traction. Her millions of followers were quick to respond, sharing their own experiences of discrimination and expressing outrage at the airline's actions. Hashtags like Justice for Maya and Just Discrimination in the Air began trending. As the online furor grew, Maya felt a mix of vindication and weariness. She had faced similar situations before, but each time it happened, it reopened old wounds. She scrolled through the comments on her post, noting the outpouring of support alongside the inevitable backlash from those who thought she was overreacting. Deciding to capitalize on the moment, Maya began a live stream from her seat. I want to talk to you all about what just happened, she began, her voice low but intense. This isn't just about a seat on a plane. It's about the everyday indignities that people of color face, the constant need to justify our presence in spaces where we're not expected to be. As Maya spoke, more passengers tuned in, some even turning on their own phones to watch the live stream. Sarah, still scribbling in her notebook, marveled at how quickly the situation had escalated. She noted how technology allowed for an immediate amplification of voices that might otherwise go unheard. Lisa, alerted to the live stream by another passenger, felt a wave of panic. She hadn't intended to discriminate against anyone. She had simply been following what she thought were the correct procedures. But now, watching Maya's impassioned speech, she began to question her own actions and biases. I need to fix this, Lisa thought, her mind racing to find a solution. But as she looked around the cabin, seeing the mix of supportive and accusatory glances from passengers, she realized that a simple apology might not be enough. This had become something much bigger than a seating dispute. Sarah, observing Lisa's distress, made a note about the complexity of the situation. No clear villains, she wrote. Just people caught in a system that perpetuates bias, often unknowingly. She began to envision a character arc for her screenplay, a well-meaning individual forced to confront their own internalized prejudices. As the flight continued, the atmosphere in the cabin remained charged. Passengers were divided, some vocally supporting Maya, others defending the airline's policies. Sarah watched as small debates broke out among seatmates, noting how the incident had sparked wider discussions about race, privilege, and accountability. Maya, finished with her live stream, sat back in her seat, emotionally drained, but resolute. She had not planned on becoming the center of a controversy today, but she was committed to using this experience to further the conversation about systemic discrimination. Lisa, still at the front of the plane, felt paralyzed by indecision. She knew she needed to address the situation, but she was acutely aware that anything she said or did now would be scrutinized, not just by the passengers on the plane, but potentially by millions of people online. As the flight approached its midpoint, it was clear that this journey had become about much more than transportation. It had transformed into a crucible for social issues, a microcosm of the larger struggles playing out in society. And for everyone on board, from Maya to Lisa to Sarah, it was becoming increasingly clear that the real destination of this flight was not Los Angeles, but a confrontation with their own beliefs, biases, and the complex realities of modern society. As the tension in the cabin continued to simmer, Lisa steeled herself for what she knew would be a difficult conversation. With a deep breath, she made her way down the aisle towards Maya's seat, acutely aware of the eyes following her every move. "Ms. Lawson," Lisa began, her voice wavering slightly despite her attempt at professionalism. "I wanted to personally apologize for the misunderstanding earlier. It was never my intention to discriminate or make you feel unwelcome." Maya looked up from her phone, her expression a mix of weariness and skepticism. She had heard apologies like this before, well-meaning but often hollow. "I appreciate you coming to speak with me," Maya replied, her tone measured. "But I hope you understand that this isn't just about me or this flight. It's about a systemic issue that affects people of color every day." Lisa nodded, feeling increasingly out of her depth. "I understand, and I want to learn. Is there anything I can do to make this right?" Maya considered the question for a moment. She could see the genuine distress on Lisa's face, but she also recognized an opportunity to effect real change. "Actually, there is," Maya said, her voice taking on a more purposeful tone. "I'd like to address the passengers, not to call anyone out, but to use this moment as a chance for education." Lisa hesitated, aware that allowing a passenger to address the cabin was against protocol. But she also realized that sticking rigidly to rules was what had led to this situation in the first place. "I'll need to check with the captain, but I think we can arrange that," she agreed. As Lisa went to consult with the flight crew, Maya began to prepare her thoughts. She wasn't looking to shame anyone, but rather to open a dialogue about the subtle ways discrimination manifests in everyday life. A few minutes later, with the captain's reluctant approval, Maya stood at the front of the cabin, facing the diverse group of passengers. "I want to thank you all for your attention," she began, her voice clear and strong. "What happened to me today is not unique. It's a small example of the biases and prejudices that many people face daily." As Maya spoke, the cabin fell silent. Even those who had been skeptical of her claims found themselves listening intently. She shared personal anecdotes of discrimination she had faced throughout her career, as well as statistics on racial profiling and bias in various industries. "The goal isn't to make anyone feel guilty," Maya continued. "It's to make us all more aware of our unconscious biases and how they can affect others. Change starts with acknowledging the problem and being willing to listen and learn." Lisa, standing at the back of the cabin, felt a mix of emotions as she listened. There was still embarrassment over her role in the incident, but also a growing sense of admiration for Maya's approach. She was turning what could have been a purely negative experience into a moment of education and growth. As Maya concluded her impromptu speech, a ripple of applause spread through the cabin. Many passengers seemed moved, some even wiping away tears. Others looked thoughtful, perhaps reflecting on their own experiences or behaviors. One passenger, an older man in a business suit, stood up. "I want to thank you, Ms. Lawson," he said, his voice gruff but sincere. "I've never really thought about these issues before, but you've given me a lot to consider." Maya nodded in acknowledgement, grateful for the positive response. As she made her way back to her seat, several passengers reached out to shake her hand or offer words of support. Lisa, still processing everything she had heard, approached Maya once again. "Thank you for doing that," she said softly. "I know it wasn't your responsibility to educate us, but I think you've made a real impact today." Maya gave her a small smile. "It's not about blame, Lisa. It's about growth. We all have room to learn and improve. As the flight continued, the atmosphere in the cabin had shifted dramatically. What had started as a tense, potentially volatile situation had transformed into a moment of collective reflection and learning. Passengers who had been strangers just hours before were now engaged in thoughtful discussions about race, privilege, and social responsibility. For Lisa, the experience was transformative. She realized that her role as a flight attendant wasn't just about serving drinks and ensuring safety protocols. It was about creating an inclusive environment for all passengers, which required ongoing education and self-reflection. As the plane began its descent into Los Angeles, there was a sense that everyone on board had just been part of something significant. It wasn't just a flight from New York to LA. It was a journey towards greater understanding and empathy. As the plane continued its journey westward, Sarah, the young film student, found herself completely engrossed in the unfolding drama. Maya's speech had struck a chord with her, igniting a creative spark that she couldn't ignore. With renewed energy, Sarah began furiously scribbling in her notebook, the outline of a screenplay taking shape before her eyes. "NT, airplane, day," she wrote at the top of a fresh page. A diverse group of passengers, strangers to one another, find themselves unexpectedly united by a single act of discrimination. Sarah's pen flew across the paper as she sketched out character descriptions and plot points, drawing inspiration from the real-life drama playing out around her. She envisioned a story that would delve deep into the complexities of modern race relations, exploring how a seemingly small incident could snowball into a transformative experience for an entire group of people. Sarah knew that capturing the nuances of this situation, the initial tension, the subsequent dialogue, and the gradual shift in understanding would be crucial to the impact of her story. Meanwhile, several rows ahead, Lisa found herself in a quiet moment of reflection. The weight of the day's events pressed heavily on her conscience. Pulling out her phone, she began to research Maya Lawson's career in activism, her eyes widening as she scrolled through article after article, detailing Maya's impressive body of work and her tireless efforts in the fight for civil rights. Lisa read about Maya's humble beginnings, her breakthrough roles in critically acclaimed films, and her transition into using her platform for social activism. She learned about Maya's impassioned speeches at rallies, her testimony before Congress on issues of racial inequality, and her foundation dedicated to supporting underprivileged youth in the arts. As she delved deeper into Maya's life and work, Lisa felt a mix of admiration and shame. How could she have been so unaware of this remarkable woman and the important work she was doing? The realization of her own ignorance was uncomfortable, but Lisa pushed through it, determined to learn and grow from this experience. Just then, Lisa's phone buzzed with a message from Tom. "Heads up," it read. "The story's starting to break on social media. It's not looking good for the airline." Lisa's heart sank as she quickly pulled up Twitter and saw the hashtags "Near Discrimination," "In the Air," and "Dwyer Boycott Airline" trending. Comments ranged from expressions of outrage to calls for Lisa's termination. The airline's official account was being inundated with angry messages demanding a response. Feeling a surge of panic, Lisa realized that this incident could have far-reaching consequences, not just for her career, but for the entire airline. She knew she needed to act quickly to address the situation, but she also recognized that any action she took needed to be genuine and meaningful, not just a hasty attempt at damage control. Back in her seat, Sarah continued to flesh out her screenplay idea. She decided to focus on three main characters: a flight attendant grappling with her own biases, a celebrity activist using her platform to educate, and a young observer inspired to create change through art. As she wrote, Sarah felt a growing sense of purpose. This wasn't just a story. It was an opportunity to contribute to an important conversation about race and privilege in America. Sarah glanced up from her notebook, her gaze landing on Maya. The actress sat quietly in her economy seat, her eyes closed, but her posture suggesting she was far from relaxed. Sarah marveled at Maya's composure in the face of such blatant discrimination. She made a note to explore in her screenplay the emotional toll that constantly fighting against prejudice can take on an individual. As the flight progressed, the cabin hummed with quiet conversations. Passengers who had witnessed Maya's speech were discussing their own experiences with discrimination or reflecting on times they might have unknowingly perpetuated harmful stereotypes. The atmosphere had shifted from one of tension to one of introspection and cautious dialogue. Lisa, still reeling from the social media backlash, knew she needed to make a decision. Should she try to smooth things over quietly, hoping the incident would blow over? Or should she take a bolder stance, acknowledging the mistake and committing to real change within the airline? As she weighed her options, Lisa realized that this moment was bigger than just her job or the airline's reputation. It was an opportunity to be part of a meaningful shift in how companies approach issues of diversity and inclusion. With a deep breath, she began to formulate a plan, knowing that her next actions could have far-reaching implications for herself, the airline, and potentially the industry as a whole. As the flight entered its final hours, Lisa made a decision that would change the course of events. With determination in her steps, she approached Maya's seat once again. This time, her demeanor was different, more open, vulnerable, and genuinely contrite. "Ms. Lawson," Lisa began, her voice low but steady. "I know I've already apologized, but I realize now that my earlier words were inadequate. I'd like to have a real conversation with you if you're willing. I want to understand and learn from this experience." Maya looked up, surprise evident in her expression. She studied Lisa's face for a moment, sensing the flight attendant's sincerity. "All right," Maya nodded, gesturing to the empty seat beside her. "Let's talk." Lisa sat down, taking a deep breath before speaking. "I've spent the last hour researching your work and your activism. I'm ashamed that I didn't recognize you earlier, but more than that, I'm ashamed that it took this incident for me to educate myself on these important issues." Maya's expression softened slightly. "Recognition isn't the point," she said. "The problem is the underlying assumptions and biases that led to the situation in the first place." Lisa nodded. "You're absolutely right. And that's what I want to understand better. Can you tell me more about your experiences? What it's like to constantly face these kinds of situations?" As Maya began to share her stories, Lisa listened intently. She heard about the subtle microaggressions Maya faced daily, the constant need to prove herself in spaces where she was often the only person of color, and the exhaustion that came from always being expected to educate others about racism. "It's not just about this one incident on this one flight," Maya explained. "It's about a lifetime of similar experiences, each one a small cut that eventually creates a deep wound." Lisa felt a lump forming in her throat as the weight of Maya's words sank in. "I had no idea," she said softly. "I mean, I knew racism existed, but I didn't understand how pervasive and damaging these everyday occurrences could be." As their conversation continued, other passengers nearby began to take notice. Some leaned in, listening respectfully to the dialogue unfolding before them. Sarah, still in her seat a few rows back, furiously scribbled notes, capturing the rawness and honesty of the exchange. Maya, encouraged by Lisa's genuine interest, delved deeper into her experiences. She talked about the importance of representation in media, the challenges of being a voice for her community, while also being true to herself as an artist, and her hopes for a future where conversations like this wouldn't be necessary. Lisa, for her part, shared her own background, her upbringing in a predominantly white suburb, her limited exposure to diverse perspectives, and her realization of how much she still had to learn. "I want to do better," she said earnestly, "not just for this flight, but in my life and my work. How can I start?" Maya considered the question carefully. Listening is a great start, she said, but it's also about actively seeking out diverse perspectives, challenging your own assumptions, and using whatever platform you have to promote inclusivity. As their conversation wound down, both women felt a shift in their relationship. What had started as a contentious interaction had transformed into a moment of genuine connection and mutual understanding. Lisa stood up, feeling both emotionally drained and oddly invigorated. "Thank you, Ms. Lawson, for your time, your patience, and your willingness to engage in this dialogue. I promise you, this conversation will lead to real changes, not just for me, but for our airline's policies and training." Maya nodded, a small smile playing on her lips. "That's all any of us can do. Listen, learn, and strive to be better. Thank you for taking that first step." As Lisa made her way back to her station, she felt the eyes of the passengers on her, but instead of judgment, she saw something else in their gazes: respect, and perhaps a reflection of their own desire to engage in these difficult but necessary conversations. The atmosphere in the cabin had transformed. What had begun as a tense, potentially volatile situation had evolved into a powerful moment of collective growth and understanding. As the plane began its initial descent into Los Angeles, there was a sense among the passengers that they had all just been part of something truly significant, a microcosm of the broader societal conversations happening across the country, played out at 30,000 feet in the air. As the plane began its descent into Los Angeles, the mood in the cabin had shifted dramatically from the tense atmosphere that had dominated much of the flight. The conversation between Lisa and Maya had sparked a ripple effect, inspiring other passengers to engage in their own discussions about diversity, inclusion, and personal experiences with discrimination. Near the back of the plane, Sarah found herself at the center of an impromptu discussion group. Her constant note-taking had caught the attention of her seatmates, and when they inquired about her work, she eagerly shared her idea for a screenplay based on the day's events. "It's about how a single incident can spark a wider conversation and lead to personal growth," Sarah explained, her eyes bright with enthusiasm. "I want to explore how we can move from confrontation to understanding, even in the most unexpected places." A middle-aged woman across the aisle leaned in, intrigued. "That sounds fascinating. You know, I've never really thought about how these issues play out in everyday situations like this flight." "Exactly," Sarah responded. "That's what I want to capture. How these big, societal issues manifest in small moments, and how those moments can be turning points." As the group around Sarah grew, passengers began sharing their own stories. An elderly man recounted how his views on race had evolved over his lifetime. A young mother spoke about her concerns raising biracial children in a world still grappling with prejudice. A college student admitted to confronting his own unconscious biases for the first time. Sarah listened intently, jotting down notes and ideas. She realized that her screenplay had the potential to be much more than just a retelling of today's events. It could be a mosaic of diverse experiences, all interconnected by the common thread of human dignity and the struggle for equality. Meanwhile, Lisa had rejoined Tom near the front of the plane. She felt a newfound sense of purpose, energized by her conversation with Maya and the positive changes she saw happening around the cabin. "Tom," she said, her voice filled with determination, "we need to do something about this when we land. This can't just be a one-time thing. We need to push for real changes in our training, our policies, everything." Tom nodded, a mix of admiration and concern on his face. "I agree, but you know it won't be easy. Corporate might try to sweep this under the rug, treat it as a PR problem rather than a chance for real change." "Then we'll make them listen," Lisa replied firmly. "We have a responsibility to do better, to be better. And after today, I think we'll have allies in this fight." As they discussed potential strategies for approaching their superiors, Lisa noticed Maya making her way down the aisle. The actress paused, making eye contact with Lisa and offering a small, encouraging smile before continuing to the restroom. That simple gesture of acknowledgement filled Lisa with renewed confidence. She realized that this wasn't just about avoiding future incidents or protecting the airline's reputation. It was about being on the right side of history, about actively working to create a more just and inclusive world. As the plane descended through the clouds, the passengers began to prepare for landing. The seatbelt sign dinged on, and people reluctantly returned to their assigned seats. But the energy in the cabin remained charged with a sense of possibility. Sarah closed her notebook, her mind racing with ideas for her screenplay. She knew she had witnessed something special today, a microcosm of social change playing out in the confined space of an airplane cabin. She was determined to do justice to the story she had heard, to create a piece of art that could continue the conversation started on this flight. Lisa stood at the front of the cabin, preparing for landing procedures. As she looked out at the faces of the passengers, faces that now seemed more familiar, more human than they had just hours ago, she felt a profound sense of responsibility. She knew that the real work would begin once they touched down, but she was ready for the challenge. As the wheels of the plane touched down on the runway at LAX, there was a collective sense among the passengers that they were landing in more ways than one. They had embarked on a journey that went far beyond the physical distance between New York and Los Angeles. It was a journey of understanding, of confronting uncomfortable truths, and of finding common ground in the shared experience of human dignity. The plane taxied to the gate, carrying with it the seeds of change planted during this extraordinary flight. As the plane came to a stop at the gate, the usual rush to disembark was noticeably absent. Instead, passengers lingered, exchanging contact information and continuing their conversations. The shared experience of the flight had created an unexpected bond among these once strangers. Lisa stood at the exit, bidding farewell to the passengers as they left. Her interaction with each person felt different now, more meaningful, more human. As Maya approached, the two women shared a moment of silent understanding. "Ms. Lawson," Lisa said, her voice steady but filled with emotion, "I want to thank you again. This flight, it's changed me. I promise you, I'll do everything in my power to ensure this leads to real change within our airline." Maya nodded, a small smile playing on her lips. "I believe you will, Lisa. And remember, this isn't the end. It's just the beginning of a longer journey." She paused, then pulled out a business card. "Let's stay in touch. I'd like to hear about the progress you make." Lisa took the card, feeling its weight in her hand, a tangible symbol of the responsibility she now carried. "I'd like that," she replied. As Maya exited the plane, Sarah approached, her notebook clutched tightly to her chest. "Excuse me, Ms. Lawson?" she said, her voice tinged with nervousness and excitement. "I'm a film student, and I've been so inspired by what happened on this flight. I was wondering if I could talk to you sometime about your experiences. I'm working on a screenplay." Maya's eyes lit up with interest. "A screenplay? About today?" Sarah nodded eagerly. "Not just about today, but about all the stories I heard, all the perspectives. I want to create something that continues the conversation we started here." "That sounds like an important project," Maya said, her tone thoughtful. "Here's my card. Have your people contact my people, and we'll set something up." Sarah beamed, clutching the card as if it were a precious artifact. "Thank you so much, Ms. Lawson. I promise I'll do justice to your story." As the last of the passengers disembarked, Lisa and her fellow crew members began their post-flight duties. But there was a new energy among them, a sense of purpose that went beyond their usual responsibilities. "We need to talk to management as soon as possible," Lisa said to Tom as they tidied the cabin. "This can't wait." Tom nodded in agreement. "I've already sent an email requesting an urgent meeting. I think they'll listen." especially once they see how much traction this story is getting on social media. Indeed, as passengers made their way through the terminal, many were already sharing their experiences online. The hashtags "ONG Transformative Flight" and "On Conversations" at 3,000 feet were trending, with people recounting the discussions they'd had and the insights they'd gained. Sarah found a quiet corner of the airport and opened her laptop, her fingers flying over the keys as she began to outline her screenplay. She knew she had witnessed something special, something that needed to be shared with a wider audience. As Lisa left the plane, she paused for a moment, looking back at the empty cabin. In just a few hours, this space had been transformed from a site of conflict to a catalyst for change. She took a deep breath, steeling herself for the challenges ahead. There would be difficult conversations, resistance to change, and hard work to be done. But she was ready for it. Stepping into the terminal, Lisa saw Maya in the distance, surrounded by a small crowd of admirers and journalists. Their eyes met briefly, and Maya gave a small nod of encouragement. Lisa straightened her shoulders and walked on, ready to face whatever came next. As the sun set over Los Angeles, the passengers of Flight 1619 dispersed into the city, each carrying with them the seeds of change planted during their journey. They had arrived not just at a physical destination, but at a new understanding of themselves and their role in creating a more just and inclusive world. The story of this extraordinary flight was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. In the days following the flight, the ripple effects of what had transpired at 30,000 feet began to spread far and wide. The incident, which had started as a personal confrontation between Lisa and Maya, had ballooned into a national conversation about discrimination, accountability, and the power of open dialogue. Social media platforms were ablaze with discussions. The hashtags "Transformative Flight" and "Conversations" at 3,000 feet continued to trend, with people from all walks of life sharing their own experiences of discrimination and bias. The story had struck a chord, prompting a broader societal reflection on how everyday interactions can perpetuate or challenge systemic inequalities. Maya, leveraging her celebrity status and social media following, had become the face of this movement. Her initial post about the incident had garnered millions of likes, shares, and comments. She was now using her platform to share resources on anti-racism, unconscious bias, and inclusive practices. In a widely shared video, Maya addressed her followers. What happened on that flight is not unique. It's a reflection of the biases that persist in our society. But what is unique is how we chose to respond. We turned a moment of conflict into an opportunity for growth and understanding. That's the power each of us holds, the power to choose dialogue over division, education over ignorance. The airline found itself at the center of a media storm. Initial attempts to downplay the incident as an isolated misunderstanding were met with fierce backlash. Calls for boycotts and demands for systemic changes within the company grew louder by the day. Lisa, true to her word, had immediately pushed for a meeting with the airline's top management. Armed with a detailed account of the incident and proposals for improved diversity training and inclusive policies, she found herself in front of the company's board of directors. "What happened on that flight was a wake-up call," Lisa said, her voice steady despite her nerves. "But it's also an opportunity for our airline to lead the way in creating a truly inclusive environment for both our staff and our passengers." To her surprise and relief, the board was receptive. The viral nature of the incident had forced them to confront the issue head-on, and Lisa's proactive approach offered a path forward. By the end of the meeting, plans were in motion to overhaul the company's diversity training programs and review all policies for potential bias. Meanwhile, Sarah had thrown herself into writing her screenplay. The story had evolved beyond a simple retelling of the flight's events. It had become an exploration of how a single moment can spark personal and societal change, weaving together the perspectives of diverse characters, all grappling with their own biases and experiences. Sarah's professor, impressed by her passion and the timeliness of the project, had connected her with a mentor in the film industry. The screenplay was generating buzz even before its completion, with several production companies expressing interest in the concept. As promised, Maya had made time to speak with Sarah, providing invaluable insights for the screenplay. Their conversations went beyond the events of the flight, delving into Maya's experiences as a woman of color in Hollywood and her journey as an activist. "Your story has the potential to continue the conversation we started on that flight," Maya told Sarah during one of their talks. "Art has the power to change hearts and minds in a way that facts and figures alone cannot." The incident had also sparked discussions within the broader airline industry. Other companies, seeing the positive response to the transparency and change initiatives of Maya's airline, began to reevaluate their own practices. Industry leaders were now talking about creating standardized, comprehensive anti-bias training for all airline staff. As the story continued to unfold in the media, it became clear that the impact of that single flight had extended far beyond its passengers. It had become a catalyst for change, prompting individuals and institutions alike to examine their own biases and commit to creating more inclusive environments. The transformative flight had indeed marked the beginning of a journey, a collective journey towards greater understanding, empathy, and equality. And while the destination might still be far off, each step forward, each conversation started, each mind opened, was bringing it closer to reality. 6 months after the transformative flight, the ripples of change had grown into waves, touching lives far beyond those directly involved in the original incident. Maya, true to her activist roots, had leveraged the attention from the flight to launch a nationwide campaign called Conversations for Change. The initiative brought together people from diverse backgrounds to engage in open, honest dialogues about race, privilege, and equality. Community centers, schools, and corporations across the country were hosting these conversations, creating spaces for understanding and growth. On a warm Saturday afternoon, Maya found herself back at the airport where it all began. This time, she wasn't there as a passenger, but as a keynote speaker for a charity event organized by the airline. The event, titled "Sky's the Limit, Promoting Equality in the Air and Beyond," was a fundraiser for organizations working towards social justice and educational equity. As Maya approached the podium, she saw Lisa in the front row, no longer in her flight attendant uniform, but dressed in business attire. Lisa had been promoted to the newly created position of Director of Diversity and Inclusion for the airline, a role she had embraced with passion and dedication. 6 months ago, an incident on a flight from New York to Los Angeles could have been just another story of discrimination, Maya began, her voice strong and clear. Instead, it became a catalyst for change, not just for one airline, but for an entire industry and beyond. She went on to detail the progress that had been made, the comprehensive anti-bias training now standard across major airlines, the increase in diverse hiring practices, and the ongoing commitment to creating inclusive spaces for all travelers. But perhaps the most significant change, Maya continued, has been in the conversations we're now having. We've moved from avoiding uncomfortable topics to embracing them as opportunities for growth and understanding. As Maya spoke, she noticed a familiar face in the crowd, Sarah, the young filmmaker whose screenplay had been inspired by the flight. Sarah's project had gained momentum, attracting backing from a major studio and generating buzz in the film industry for its nuanced approach to issues of race and privilege. After the speech, as people mingled and networked, Lisa approached Maya. The two women, once on opposite sides of a conflict, now greeted each other warmly. "Your speech was incredible," Lisa said, her eyes bright with emotion. "I never could have imagined, 6 months ago, that we'd be here today." Maya smiled. "It's a testament to what can happen when we approach difficult situations with openness and a willingness to learn." Their conversation was interrupted by Sarah, who rushed over with excitement. "Maya, Lisa, I have amazing news. The studio has greenlit the film. We start production next month." The three women shared a moment of joy, each reflecting on the unexpected journey that had brought them to this point. As the event wound down, Maya found herself in a quiet corner with Lisa and Sarah. "You know," she said thoughtfully, "what happened on that flight was just the beginning. The real story is what we've all done since then, the changes we've made, the conversations we've started, the lives we've touched." Lisa nodded in agreement. "It's like ripples in a pond. We may never know how far they'll reach or what shores they'll touch." Sarah, ever the storyteller, chimed in. "And that's the beauty of it. Every conversation, every small act of understanding or inclusion has the potential to create more ripples, to touch more lives." As they looked out over the bustling airport, watching travelers from all walks of life rushing to their destinations, there was a shared sense of purpose among the three women. They had embarked on a journey 6 months ago, a journey of change, understanding, and growth, and in many ways, that journey was just beginning. The story of the transformative flight had evolved into something much bigger than any of them could have imagined. It had become a testament to the power of dialogue, the importance of confronting uncomfortable truths, and the potential for positive change that exists in every interaction, no matter how small it may seem. As Maya, Lisa, and Sarah parted ways, each heading off to continue their work in their respective fields, they carried with them the lessons learned from that fateful flight. They knew that the work of creating a more just and inclusive world was ongoing, but they were committed to the journey, one conversation, one policy change, one story at a time. And as the sun set over the airport, casting a golden glow over the runways and terminals, there was a sense of hope in the air, a hope that the transformative power of understanding and empathy would continue to spread, touching lives and changing hearts, one flight at a time.